going to do a video on a oil pressure switch or sensor installation on a 2010 Yukon Denali with the 6.2 liter in it. One thing to note is I'm doing this, going to give a detailed video on how to do it the quote-unquote right way, removing the intake manifold. I really haven't seen any videos that have kind of went into good detail on that, but you can see I got it apart. And initially, the reason that I did it this way is I tried to do it the quick cheater way. And I did another video on why that didn't work. With the 6.2, you have very little room. And this was easy. It sounded scary to remove the intake, but I've never done it before, and it probably took me less than 30 minutes to get this way. And everything is like right out in the open. So I got it torn apart, but we'll do kind of a installation video here and kind of at the same time say how I got everything apart. And hopefully if you need to do this, you can do it this way and do it very, very easily without struggling, beating up your hand or fighting all day. So the problem I had is my oil pressure gauge was pegged at 80. The sensor was the problem. It threw me a code. I believe it's a P0. So that code is a P0521. Here's my new part from GM right here. Also, you need to make sure you get a new filter. Most of the videos online don't show a filter, but these do have a filter inside. And make sure you look at a parts manual and make sure that your vehicle, if it has a filter and you go through all this, you need to replace that. So let's start putting stuff back in. So here's the first step. I got my new filter. It's going to go right in that hole right there. We're going to put it down there. To get this out, what I did is I used a small 90-degree pick. You could also use a regular screwdriver and just kind of pry it out. I've also seen people, videos, screw a bolt into the end of it. You just have to be careful that you don't knock it down doing that. But this just will slip in this hole as a step. So the new filter literally just drops right in. The next step is to install the new pressure sensor. To get it out, obviously you just unscrew it, screw the new one in. It's got threads on or Teflon on the new threads. And then I'm going to use a oil pressure, sensor pressure socket that I got to tighten it. You can also use a 1 1/16 inch wrench for this project. But this is nice because it fits it perfectly because the edges are kind of rounded on each of the 6 points. So this is the best, and this cost about, I think it was $5 from a local auto parts store. So I'm going to go ahead, slip this on here, and tighten it down. And you can obviously see nicely here when it's tight because you can see it. So I'll tighten that down. After you have it tightened down, the next step is to hook up the electrical connection. Only goes on one way. You want to make sure that that rubber seal is still on inside there. Line it up. And then this is how this connector works. The most difficult thing in getting any of this stuff apart, I think, is the electrical connections. To install, the first step is with this little gray tab up, push it down until it snaps, and then push this gray lock down. You'll hear it click. Now, that one doesn't have much of a click left to it. Anyways, the gray is a locking tab. So when you remove this, the gray has to come up, and then you push the black tab in, and installation is reverse. So your next step is going to be to reinstall the intake manifold. Here it is. This is the driver's side. This is the passenger side. That's the back. If you want to get extra credit points on this project, you can put new gaskets on the bottom of these. Also, you want to open this up and tilt the throttle body, tilt this thing forward, and there's probably going to be some oil in here. You want to mop that up, or I guess if you want bonus points, you could replace the whole thing, but whatever. In any event, you can see that the main reason I'm showing this is how it goes together. you can get a clear view of the evap tube that connects here, electrical connection here, up in the center. This tube that connects down behind. The fuel rails are still completely assembled to the injectors. The fuel line is disconnected here. This is that plate that everybody talks about. That if you're trying to do this without removing the intake manifold, gets in your way. And there are some people who try to cut this away. And you can see it's just a piece of plastic. And if you're going to do this and cut this away, just be careful. Obviously, there's a tube that runs through here. There's a tube right here. And there's wires behind it. And it's kind of unsteady. So if you're going to cut that, be really, really careful. Don't use a saw or anything like that. Use a knife and be very, very careful if you want to cut this corner off to allow you to do it without removing this, but just remove it. And on the passenger side, there's just the foreign injector clips. So I won't be able to show you this thing actually going back into the vehicle, but the main reason that I wanted to show this part of the video is how it comes out and how it goes back in. There is 5 bolts on each side with an 8mm head. And the interesting thing about them is there's this hang or ledge here that allows the shoulder on the bolt to sit there. So what you want to do as soon as when you're removing this, once you get it loosened up, pick it up and hang it on there. And then what I did to put it back in, obviously I didn't do this when I removed it, but you probably should, is put a little piece of black tape on each one of those just to hold them on that rail so you can really pull it out. So I'm going to put a piece of black tape on this one and then slide it back into the engine or on top of the engine and take those tapes off and then tighten it down. So I slid the intake back in right on top of the motor. The passenger side is very easy, not a lot to clear out of the way. This electrical connection obviously is on top. You have to lift that up as you get in. And the driver's side is where it gets a little complex. So the first thing is as you slide it back in or out is this tube here, which needs to kind of go towards the back because that needs to be in the rear. And then you can see how this kind of all goes together. Here's your evap tube going to the purge solenoid here. And if you follow that back, you can see how this all goes together. Fuel line goes on the inside. This is your EGR valve going there, and then the evap tube right through the center. And all that kind of comes together with your electrical connection over the top. You slide the intake back on. Once you slide it on, you take your 1/4-inch ratchet with a 6-inch extension and a 8mm socket and tighten down all those bolts after you take out the piece of tape that you had to hang it up on all these. And you can do that for 9 of them. The 5th one in the back on the passenger side, you will need to throw a U-joint on the end of here to get to that. But that's it, and removal is the reverse. Just take it off and pull it out. So now that you got the intake back on, you want to go ahead and hook up all your injectors. If you don't want to get confused or you're not doing this all in one day, you may want to label these front to back. In any event, these are the same kind of connectors as the oil pressure sensor. It has this locking tab, which is this green thing, and a button underneath it. So the reinstall is very easy. What you do is you push on, hear a click, and then push the green tab down, hear a click, and obviously to get these off, it's the opposite. You need to pull the green tab up and then push the button in and pull up, and it comes off. So I'm going to hook the rest of these up front to back and then move on from there. So now that all of our injectors are hooked up on both sides, we're going to do a quick complete the passenger side. Very easy, your throttle body connector. The key about this is if you're trying to disconnect the oil pressure sensor without actually seeing it, taking shortcuts, this is a good example of what that connector looks like. A gray locking tab and a button underneath. So to remove, pull the gray tab up, push the button down, and pull off. Installation is push down and then push the lock tab. Okay. Next is a map sensor here on top. Connects right to the middle of the intake, and this just pushes on. To remove this, you have a little tab underneath here. You actually lift up on this and pull off to get that off. Finally, this wiring harness that's hanging over the top here. Some people cut all this tape and the body dart. You don't need to do that. Just loosen up this 10mm nut here that holds it in the center. The big cable runs to the passenger side. The small cable, wire cable, actually runs through that little groove in that plastic deflector that causes so much pain for this. So we'll bolt that back down. So next on the driver's side, a little bit more to do here. First, we'll take this hose that goes to the master cylinder. That just slides on. And we'll move this pinch connector up with a pair of pliers over that. It's obviously easy to remove. You have your evap purge valve. Goes in right here on the side of the evap purge solenoid. And this is just an easy disconnect or reconnect. To put it on, you just push it on. And if you wanted to take this off, there's a little tab here, that white thing there. You just push down on that and pull it off. It comes off real easy. Next, the EGR valve tube had to be disconnected. Goes to the center of the intake, goes down right here to the back of the driver's side valve cover. And again, this is one of these push connectors. It's got a little tab right here on the side. To remove it, you push this forward and pull up. To put it back on, you just push it on. There you go. Okay, last on this side, you have your fuel line to reconnect. Right here, fuel line just slips back on here and will reconnect. This is actually probably the last thing. In retrospect, the first thing I should have reconnected. In any event, it pushes on. It'll push on, and you're going to hear a click if I push hard. The key why I'm showing this, I needed two hands to push it on, but it did click on there, that fuel line. Again, the main reason I'm showing this is twofold. Number one, how to remove it. You do need this special tool. This cost $6 at a local discount automotive store. You can get this online for as low as $3. In any event, what you do to disconnect the fuel lines on these is you put this around the fuel line, and then you push this in as you pull or hold the fuel line, and that'll depress the little tabs inside there and allow you to pull the fuel line right off. The last thing, I obviously didn't depress those. The last thing is to show the reconnect. GM has this little locker here. You slide these little hooks in. to the fuel line, and then clip this down around the body of it. To removal is obviously the reverse, pull it up and then slide it back. Next thing real quick is the radiator, or the alternator reinstall. I've had it sitting right down here on the passenger side, laying on those hoses. We'll bring it up and put it back in its harness. So there's the alternator flipped back over. These two bolts that hold it on is all we removed before. You need a 15mm wrench for those. We put those back in, secured the alternator down. We never disconnected the main wire that goes to it. You do have a little sensor wire here. The removal of this, you push the tab and pull it up, obviously to put it back on. Tab towards the back and just push down. Okay, next use that same 15mm wrench. Take your tension off the belt with your belt tensioner and reroute your belt just like it was when you started. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. Next is this big hose connector. Connects the filter apparatus to the air intake. Hose connects there underneath and right to the top of the intake, and the only other connection is this kind of a rubber grommet here that connects right here. So we'll slide this on and hook it back up, tighten those up, and then we're done. So I got that on and hooked it up there and tightened that hose clamp right there. I use my 5/16 socket and a 1/4" driver to do that. One little thing, I did have to actually take this rubber bushing out, slide it on, and then push the bushing back down in order to get that fit right. And then I disconnected this connector. I'll reconnect this. One quick correction, I think I said earlier to pry it up. To remove this, since I just had to do it again, it's actually push down and pull out, but anyways, to put it on, you just push it on. Okay, we'll put the cover over the top. It hooks on here and right here, and hooks in the back. Reconnect the negative cable in the battery, and that's it. This whole thing, disassembly, took me less than 30 minutes. I've never done it before. Very, very, very easy to do it the right way. I think I spent more time trying to, tape extensions together to do it the wrong way and find the thing. Anyways, I hope this video helps. If you try to do this, it's very difficult to get to if you try to not remove these other components. But if you do, this is a straightforward project that with minimal tools that we've talked about, you should be able to get done in less than an hour and a half with no issues and without breaking your hand or killing yourself. Anyways, hope it helps. Thanks.